With that, I knew I was ready. I had only one objective left. I was going to find the stronghold, and I was going to defeat the Ender Dragon. In order to defeat the Ender Dragon, I knew I would need to get myself prepared. It wasn't going to be just as simple as storming a stronghold and jumping through the portal. I'm getting better at the game, but not that much better. So I took some time devising a plan, a small list of things that I needed before I could go on to the end. I knew my equipment wasn't exactly where I wanted it to be, so that was going to be the first thing I was going to take care of. And that was also where I hit my first roadblock. You see, in the recent updates, Mojang did a complete overhaul to villager trades. It's no longer possible to get max enchantments on just any librarian villager. For each unique enchantment, I would have to go biome to biome and gather villagers from all over, and even then, the list of enchantments I could get were lame at best. Now, normally this wouldn't be a problem. I can buy 2 Sharpness 3 books and combine them to get Sharpness 4, and then I can combine 2 Sharpness 4 books into Sharpness 5. But, of course, it's not that simple. In order to combine the books, I need levels, and every combination of books increases the level cost more and more. Now again, this isn't really a problem on its own. I can endlessly grind levels at the mob farm or by using villagers. But, of course, there is a catch. For some reason, combining too many things in an anvil smacks you with this message. It literally doesn't matter if you have 1,000,000 levels, you'll still get this pop-up after less than 50. Because of this, I had only one other option. I had to manually enchant everything. Admittedly, this strategy wasn't flawless either, but I could still get better enchantments in the table than I could from villagers. At the same time though, this would put me at another roadblock. To get the best I could get, I would need at least 2 of every item. The enchanting table doesn't allow you to enchant anything better than, say, Efficiency 4, Power 4, or Sharpness 4, for example. Because of this, I needed to get my hands on some diamonds, so with that, I found something I could actually do. I decided this time around I would go on another caving trip rather than strip mining. I knew I was in for a lot of grinding later, so I wanted to actually play the game for this session, so I made my way to the pit around the other side of the mountain base and I jumped down, following the cave system and grabbing any iron I saw along the way, since I would need a lot of iron for anvils during the enchanting process. It wasn't long before I found my first diamond, only about 15 minutes into the session, but it was only a single diamond and it wasn't even helped by my Fortune 3. I found more a few minutes later though, totaling up to 3, and then shortly after that I found myself stumbling across this. I debated heading down, but I ultimately decided against it. Frankly, the risk of accidentally summoning a warden far outweighed the chance for decent loot, at least for right now, though this did unfortunately mean passing up 2 diamonds. My next find was a small mineshaft, but it was disappointingly empty, not even a cave spider spawner, though I suppose I should be thankful for that. A short time later, I managed to loop back around to the ancient city. This time it was from the opposite direction, and while I had no intention to loot it, I was able to get to the diamonds that I had seen earlier. Eventually, my adventure brought me out to this massive cave that was absolutely crawling with monsters. There were 2 diamond ores down at the bottom, and ultimately I chose to begin what ended up being a nearly 10-minute battle to get down to them. Ultimately, I was successful in retrieving them, and a few steps later, I stumbled upon even more diamonds that were right next to a spider spawner. With my inventory full to bursting, I made my way out of the cave with 33 diamonds and more than 9 stacks of raw iron. It took an additional 25 minutes to smelt all of that iron, so I used that time to get prepared for my next task. I made a couple blast furnaces, and I gathered some of the materials I'd be using down at the grinder. I also took this time to finally give my wolf a name. Kira, after one of my favorite artists on Twitter. Likewise, I also dyed her collar light blue. Anyways, once I had everything prepared, I made my way back down to the grinder. The next 3 hours of my life was spent enchanting all of my gear and re-rolling enchantments. I remembered a TikTok saying that if you put a piece of gold gear in the table, you get better possible enchantments on it, and then by switching the gold to the same diamond item, those better enchantments would carry over. Honestly, I can't really tell if that's true. On the one hand, the enchantments I got on the gold and diamond gear were usually identical, though I rarely got any crazy luck with the bonus enchantments. In fact, I ended up recording for so long that OBS straight up crashed on me, so I didn't even end up capturing the last few enchantments. Thankfully, I did notice before I started merging stuff together though. Also, while I was working on grinding levels, I ended up digging out a whole nother room beneath the grinder. I did time-lapse the digging process, as you're seeing now, but the building process was scattered across the 3 hours of grinding. Rather than a building time-lapse, I'll just show you all what I did down here. So first and foremost, the reason I extended it downwards in the first place was to expand the storage system. I added some additional hoppers and chests from the dropper itself, and then over here on the right, I added a whole storage system. From left to right, these 6 chests are all dedicated to rotten flesh. I don't think I'll ever fill all of them, but I get rotten flesh the most frequently, so it's good to have a ton of extra space for it. Next up is the armor and tools the zombies drop most frequently. Leather armor in the top, then gold armor, and then once I fill all 4 of these rows, I'll start smelting it into nuggets. And then chain on the bottom, and the same space for iron nuggets. Then we've got iron armor and iron ingots on the top, swords in the middle, and shovels on the bottom. Finally, over here are potatoes, carrots, and in the bottom chest it's just miscellaneous junk like copper from the occasional drowned, chickens and feathers from the rare jockeys, and any heads that I get while I'm grinding, like drowned heads. I also set up 2 auto smelters, one with blast furnaces and one with normal furnaces. On the back wall, I've also got myself a little bit of a lava farm just to fuel the smelters so I won't have to use up all my coal like I have been up in the hobbit hole. Finally, for decoration, I ended up going on a little trip out to gather some copper. I didn't intend to leave any of this in the video, but while I was out, I ended up stumbling across another zombie spawner, and I found myself an enchanted golden apple. I also got a saddle, but that's far less exciting. Anyways, once I had finally finished all of the back and forth, I did end up with some pretty decent gear. When I was done combining everything, this is what it looked like. First up, on my armor. On my helmet, I have Protection 4, Respiration 3, Unbreaking 3, and Aqua Affinity. On my chestplate, I have Protection 4, Unbreaking 3, and Thorns 2. On my leggings, I have Protection 4 and Unbreaking 3. And on my boots, I have Protection 4, Depth Strider 3, Feather Falling 4, and Unbreaking 3. I did give them all names, but they were nothing special, just Emberheart matching the rest of my branding. My tools' names were a bit more personalized, though. As for their enchantments, on my sword I have Unbreaking 3, Sharpness 5, Looting 3, and Sweeping Edge 3. Also, I gave it the name Cardinal Edge, which actually has a few references therein. First of all, cardinals have a very special meaning to me and my family, which is why the cardinal symbolism is so heavily ingrained in my avatar and in my logo. Apart from that, Cardinal Edge is the name of a special sword in a story that I've been working on, and several of my build plans for later also are inspired and taken from that story. Next up on my pickaxe, I have Efficiency 5, Unbreaking 3, and Fortune 3. I gave it the name Apocalypse, which is a reference to a sword from Final Fantasy VII that triples AP growth. Since Fortune increases the amount of minerals you get when mining, I thought it was a fitting reference. On my shovel, I have Unbreaking 3, Efficiency 5, and Silk Touch. I named it Ace of Spades for obvious reasons, I just like the pun. Finally, on my axe, I have Fortune 3, Efficiency 5, and Unbreaking 3. I named it Hearthstone, another reference to that aforementioned story. In addition to those, I also fixed up and merged those bows that I got in the first episode. On the final bow, I had Punch 2, Power 5, Flame, Mending, and Unbreaking 3. I named it Persephone, which, in addition to being a reference to Greek mythology, is also the name of Sunny's character's bow in my story. When I was finally done with all of the enchanting and merging, I was left with only one more thing that I needed before I was done. I needed mending. Now, there are a couple of ways I can get mending books. I could get it rarely from fishing, which was way too grindy for my tastes. I could also loot them from ancient cities, which would be much less grindy, but also, you know. Finally, there's the good old classic villager trades. Now, there was just one problem with that. Because of the changes made in 1.20, certain books are locked behind villagers of certain biomes. You want to know what biome mending is locked behind? The swamp. Now, I have traveled thousands of blocks in this world while searching for bamboo and wood for building, and not once in any of my journeys did I even see a swamp. This left me with two options. I could either wander around my world until I found one, or I could use a website like Chunkbase to find a swamp for me. Technically, I could also use the /locate command, but if the biome was too far away, it'll just come back with an error message instead. Frankly, I didn't want to go the route of just wandering around and hoping for the best, so I grabbed my seed and I headed over to Chunkbase. I pasted my seed into the bar, made sure the game version was correct, and deselected everything but biomes and my spawn point. Then I watched as my world loaded onto the screen. What you're seeing right now is a little over a 1,000 block radius of spawn. Now, here's a little over 2,000, still no swamps in sight. Zooming all the way out to 3,000 blocks, finally there's 3 swamps that appear. Realistically, this one here is the closest one to my location, but even that is over 2,500 blocks away. That's a long way to travel just to get one librarian, but still, I needed mending if I was going to keep the tools that I just spent more than 3 hours grinding for. Just to be absolutely certain that it wouldn't be a waste of time, I switched over to my creative copy of the world and I teleported myself to the swamp. I spawned in a villager and I popped down a lectern and I checked his trades, and I got Quick Charge 3. I re-rolled a few times and I didn't end up getting any of the exclusive trades. Confused, I quit back to the title screen and I had been playing 1.20.1 the whole time. I could have just bred all of the villagers that I needed for all of those enchantments that whole time. So I feel like I should explain a bit here. I mentioned in my first episode that I've been playing on Bedrock for the better of 4 years now, and in Bedrock the game updates automatically and it makes you play on the most recent version. On Java, I believe it does the same thing as long as you're playing on vanilla, but I have Optifine installed, so my version is modded. And you have to manually update any modded profiles in the launcher. I haven't updated the launcher since July when Sunny and I made our world. All that to say, I basically wasted like 3 hours of my life grinding enchantments. At this point, I was left with two options. Either I update the game now and deal with the 3,000 block walk to the swamp, or I could just go ahead and get the mending villager. I doubt I have to explain which of these choices I made. Now, I would love to say that I didn't waste a whole session of gameplay by picking out an area to breed villagers, clearing said area, and then screwing around until nighttime to try and find a zombie villager, but I'd be lying. My original plan was to build a whole custom village in the jungle where I got my bamboo, but I went over to scout it and I felt like the trek over there was a little bit too long to make over and over again. I was lucky enough to find a temple though, which was cool, and there were even 3 diamonds inside. So I switched the plan to building on top of the cherry grove after eluding the temple, which is where I made this little zombie curing setup. I even had a whole time lapse of it and everything, but after a whole in-game week of waiting, not a single zombie villager even spawned, and eventually I just gave up. I made my way over the mountain to the village that was a few hundred blocks away, and I ended up getting everything set up there. Once I made it there, it took less than 20 minutes to get the villagers ready for trading. I got a few Fletchers set up, I traded for emeralds, and then I got my mending books in the time span of like 45 minutes. I left with 12 books. 8 for the gear I currently had, and then 4 extras for a Silk Touch pickaxe, a diamond hoe, a trident, and an elytra later on. Then I headed to the grinder and I put all of them together using the levels I had gained from grinding emeralds. With my armor and tools fully put together, I had only a small checklist of things that I needed to do now. First, I had a handful of items to gather for the dragon fight. I wanted a bow and arrows, extra food, and some blocks for building up to the pillars. Then a few things for after the fight, like an ender chest, an anvil, and an extra mending book, as well as some rockets. Finally, I wanted some potions, slow falling strength, instant healing, and regeneration, and a carved pumpkin that I could wear on my head so that I didn't accidentally anger any endermen. The last item on my list was ender pearls to get to the stronghold. Now I had 2 routes that I could go for this, either grinding endermen in the nether or trading with piglins and just hoping that I got pearls. Now, I had over a stack of gold in my base, so I ended up taking it into the nether to do a few trades. In the end, I think I got pearls only a single time. All the rest of my pearls were from Endermen that I just happened to find on the way. But hey, at least I got them. Finally, with all of those items in hand, I made my Eyes of Ender and I headed off to the stronghold. When the eyes told me I was above the stronghold, I dug my way down and I dropped in. It took me a little bit of wandering, so much so that I actually ended up finding a diamond, but eventually I did find the portal. I took a few seconds to get my inventory sorted and set my spawn point here. Then I grabbed my Eyes of Ender and I began the finale. With that final arrow, I had done it. It was a long battle, but in the end, I beat the Ender Dragon, and I freed the End. I watched proudly as the dragon writhed and burst to hundreds of experience orbs, and once I had gathered everything it left behind, I jumped back into the portal. I had beaten Minecraft.